Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome, everyone, to a deep dive. Today, we're focusing on the early life of Siddhartha Gautama, specifically looking at his royal upbringing. You've sent us some really interesting sources exploring the comfort, the sheer luxury, but also, crucially, the isolation he seems to have experienced. Our mission really is to cut through the surface descriptions of palaces and jewels and really distill the key insights these sources offer about what growing up in that incredibly unique environment actually meant.
Exactly. It's about going beyond just picturing the opulence. We want to explore the less obvious aspects, maybe the paradoxes, and the profound implications of being raised in such a rarefied atmosphere based on the material you've shared.
Right. So let's start with the environment itself. Accounts describe the comfort and luxury around Siddhartha from birth as being almost, well, beyond the imagination of most people. And this wasn't just like incidental wealth. It sounds like an engineered world. We're talking different palaces for different seasons, yeah. Each one meticulously filled with beautiful objects, designed, it seems, for constant sensory pleasure.
Mm-hmm. And that extended to every single need. He was attended by, numerous servants, his desires met instantly, sometimes even before he asked. What's fascinating here is the type of luxury mentioned in the sources, the absolute finest foods, the most exquisite fabrics, music and dance always available. Materially, it paints a picture that some sources even call, like, utopian comfort.
And crucially, this wasn't just happenstance. The sources really emphasize that this whole environment was painstakingly created by his father, King Siddhartha, with a very specific intention. He went to extraordinary lengths, it seems, to make sure Siddhartha was completely shielded from anything that might cause him distress, anything unpleasant.
Yeah, the goal was singular, wasn't it? To steer his son firmly towards being a king, like him, and to prevent any thoughts of renunciation, of leaving that life from ever even taking root.
Now, you can sort of see this, on the surface anyway, as maybe a father's act of intense love, protection, trying to give his son the absolute best life, free from suffering.
Sure, but what your sources also highlight is the deeper implication. This constant shielding, while protective in one sense, created what's described as a very artificial and perhaps even a sheltered reality for him, especially for someone meant to rule.
Let's get specific about what he was shielded from. The sources suggest he simply wouldn't have seen common human experiences, things like old age, sickness, or death. He wouldn't have known poverty either, or, any kind of real struggle firsthand.
Right. The material suggests he was essentially living in this meticulously constructed, beautiful bubble, completely removed from the natural cycle of life and suffering that, well, everyone else outside those palace walls knew daily.
And this leads to a really interesting paradox the sources point out. While he was, surrounded by so many people, servants, attendants, the whole court, he might have simultaneously experienced a really profound kind of isolation.
It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? Surrounded by people, yet isolated. But think about it. If everyone around you is there only to serve your needs, or just follow strict protocols, is that genuine human connection? The sources seem to imply he might have lacked that genuine connection. His relationships were primarily defined by service, maybe, rather than shared experience or mutual understanding.
And that lack of shared experience is so important, isn't it? Especially when we think about empathy. Real empathy, that ability to deeply understand another's feelings, often comes from having gone through something similar, or at least seeing it up close. Siddhartha, by this account, was largely denied those kinds of opportunities.
So, while he was physically comfortable, maybe even pampered and surrounded by bodies, he could have been deeply isolated intellectually, emotionally too. The sources speculate that he might have had these big questions about the world, about life's difficulties, that just nobody in his immediate sheltered environment could truly answer from their own lived reality.
It really makes you pause and consider, doesn't it? What is the true impact of such, extreme privilege on how someone develops, how they understand the world?
And one of the key questions these sources raise is pointed right at this situation. Can a person truly grasp the human condition if they haven't witnessed its full spectrum, the good and the bad?
Yeah, and following from that, another powerful question sort of emerges from the material. Can leadership, especially leadership that needs wisdom and compassion, can it be truly effective without empathy that's born from shared realities, or at least exposure to them?
Definitely. And then on a more personal level, the sources suggest this unique kind of isolation might have contributed to a sense of maybe unfulfillment. Despite all the outward comfort, all the luxury, there could have been this deep feeling that something fundamental was missing. Because, ultimately, the human spirit often craves meaning, right? Connection, things that go beyond just material wealth or physical comfort.
So the core insight here, pulling from these sources, is quite striking. Comfort and luxury, even in their most extreme forms like Siddhartha experienced, didn't automatically equal happiness or a sense of fulfillment. And here's where it gets really interesting, based on the material you shared. Sometimes, a life that's deliberately kept free of challenges, a life kept ignorant of the wider world's realities, well, that can lead to a different kind of suffering. The suffering perhaps of ignorance and maybe a lack of real purpose.
Exactly. To sort of bring together what the sources highlight, Siddhartha's royal upbringing was this duality. It provided every material comfort you could possibly imagine, yes, but at the same time, it created this unique form of isolation. It effectively shielded him from the very realities, old age, sickness, death, suffering, that would eventually not just shatter his bubble, but actually propel him onto his world-changing path, the path to enlightenment.
It just powerfully underscores the complex, maybe even unintended consequences of that extraordinary early life. And it really sets the stage perfectly for his eventual decision to leave it all behind, doesn't it? To go searching for those deeper truths he was initially shielded from. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the really intricate world of Siddhartha's royal upbringing, the comfort, the luxury, and yes, that profound, unexpected isolation.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with, building on that idea. The very things intended to protect Siddhartha, to keep him content in the palace, ultimately highlighted what was missing. They spurred his quest for understanding the full spectrum of life. So what does that duality tell you, perhaps, about the relationship between comfort, challenge, and genuine human growth? Something to think about.